Urgent message. The well-known American investigative journalist John Salam reports on the scandal. Part of the American aid to Ukraine was allegedly sent back to the Democrats. Well, we suspected that all along, didn't we? That explains a lot. Now it becomes clear why both the Ukrainian bureaucracy and the Biden administration insisted so persistently on direct cash transfers in the billions of dollars instead of lend-lease and equipment supplies. We're talking about systemic corruption on a national scale. Here's what John Salomon said. The U.S. intercepted a message from Ukraine about a plot to funnel money into Biden's election campaign. Well, when we say Biden, we mean thief. When we say thief, we mean Biden. Continuation, the United States government, says Solomon. The National Security Agency intercepted the communications of President Zelensky's government in Ukraine in 2022, conversations in which they colluded with federal officials. The United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, which Trump dismantled, by the way, with the aim of developing a plan for use. $200 million of funds that USAID, meaning your money, ladies and gentlemen, yours and mine as well, taxpayer money. This is to finance Biden's election campaign against Donald Trump. According to a declassified document, the Ukrainian government and unnamed American government officials through USAID in Kyiv developed a plan that provided for the allocation of hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to fund a certain infrastructure project in Ukraine, which was supposed to serve as a cover for directing about 90% of the allocated funds to the Democratic National Committee to finance Joe Biden's election campaign. Well, for his re-election, the conspirators were confident that the project would receive funding from the very beginning, although at some point in the future it will be recognized. By that time, the money would already have been distributed, and it would be impossible to return it and use it for other purposes. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard recently learned about these interceptions and instructed USAID officials to check the archives, whether this plan was actually implemented and whether a criminal referral should be sent to the FBI. Gabbard's team has not yet found substantial evidence that those intercepted are being accused. The allegations were thoroughly investigated during the Biden administration, so they weren't even investigated. The intercepted communications, according to available data, are not connected to Russian disinformation. Well, as they say, an investigation still lies ahead. That's where the message from John Solomon ended. Well, let's think for ourselves. As for credibility, what does it say? First of all, the document has been officially declassified. It exists. This is not a leak, not an anonymous source. It has been officially declassified. An excellent summary of intelligence intercepts. The U.S. government acknowledges the existence of the document, period. Second, the source of the intercept. A and B. It intercepts billions of messages every day. What they intercepted, conversations of Ukrainian officials in 2022, is technically absolutely routine. That's their job. So there's no doubt about that either. Third, Tulsi Gabbard is conducting a real investigation. The Director of National Intelligence did not deny the interceptions. She ordered USAID to check the archives. If the document were a forgery, it would have been immediately refuted, but it was not refuted. Fourth, corruption in Zelensky's inner circle. Well, is it true or not? It's an established fact, ladies and gentlemen. Even the head of the president's office, Yermak, actually resigned after searches by anti-corruption agencies. Corruption in the Ukrainian state is unproven. It's made up, as Zelensky himself claimed. It's not true. It doesn't exist at all. Then I showed up, and that was it. It was over. Well, I don't know. Maybe that corruption ended. Some completely different kind started. Maybe the childish corruption ended. Okay, the document is not related to Russian disinformation. That's important. American intelligence agencies directly state that the intercepts are not a Russian disinformation operation. Sixth, the logic of the scheme is plausible. Using infrastructure projects as a cover for money laundering is a classic corruption scheme, well known in international aid. Now, the counterpoint. What suggests that something might be wrong? First, not a single independent confirmation. New York Times, Washington Post, AP, Reuters. Maybe they're not even holding back. There's nothing from them. No one has confirmed the story with their own investigation. Yeah, actually, they would never investigate this in their lives. That doesn't mean the story is false. But that's a red flag. Second, summary. What is a summary of raw intercepts? But that doesn't mean it actually happened. That's the most important difference. A summary of intercepts is someone's words recorded by a microphone. People discuss a lot of things they never actually do. The fact that a conversation happened doesn't mean the action happened, but there's a catch, and we'll talk about that too. Now, there is no evidence it was carried out. Gabbard herself admitted that her team hasn't found any proof yet that the scheme was carried out. The conversation could have stayed just that, but there's a catch. Now, the fourth point, Biden is no longer the president. So, from a practical standpoint, even if all of this is true, the political consequences are minimal. Biden. For Biden. Biden is out of the game. This is a story about the past, not the present. But, as they say, not just the recent past, but the distant past. The main question, even if they only intended to, is that nothing or is it bad? And the answer is, right away, it's bad. Well, it's bad for them, not for us. And this is why it's fundamentally important. From a legal point of view, intent by itself is a crime in many cases. Conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to engage in foreign election interference, whether it worked out or not, whether they did it or not, these are already criminal offenses, even if the act was not committed. On the 26th, that's enough to prove an agreement and a step towards carrying it out. From a political point of view, a foreign government discussing ways to direct American taxpayers' money to the American president's company is a gross violation of U.S. sovereignty, even if it remained just a discussion. This is interference in domestic politics. And morally, from a moral standpoint, the government takes taxpayers' money under the pretext of helping an ally. And this money is discussed as a tool to finance one of the political parties that is in power at that moment. And this money is being lobbied for. This is the very essence of why government aid to foreign governments is fundamentally flawed. Money inevitably becomes a political tool and not aid for the people in need. When the government gives away hundreds of billions of taxpayers' money to foreign governments without any real possibility of oversight, in this case, they didn't even want to control it. But when they just give it away, they want to control it but can't. Money inevitably becomes a tool for corruption and political manipulation. And the final destination of their money ends up being completely different from what those who gave the money expected. We mean the taxpayers, not the officials, who expected something completely different from us. This doesn't happen because certain people are bad. It happens because the system creates all the conditions for it. However, knowing how dishonest both sides are, I mean the Democratic officials and the Ukrainian bureaucracy, I'm willing to bet 100 to 1 that they did exactly what they planned. At least they tried to do it. Maybe they didn't succeed. By the way, I would be very surprised if it turns out that it's only about this amount. They never tried to do anything else. Again, whether they succeeded or not is a different story. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will keep you updated. However, I have to say that this is yet another problem for Ukraine. The Republicans are dissatisfied. More precisely, most Republicans now hate everything related to Ukraine. There is no trace of the sympathy that existed at the beginning of the Russian invasion, and that's not good. But ordinary people suffer when the thieves they elected are enriching themselves, and apparently they will go unpunished. Unfortunately. Gentlemen, once again, if there is any news, I will let you know. In any case, this is a bombshell. Goodbye until next time. Meeting.